Good morning, and welcome to Pennie's first Community Partner Work Group of 2023. We're happy to have you, and thank you for being virtually present today. My name is Marie Ortiz, and I'm here to help facilitate today's session. We're going to just go ahead and jump right in because we have a packed agenda of topics to get through. For those who don't know me, my role here at Pennie is to help identify and fill operational gaps. It's a pleasure to be here today and present you with today's agenda, which again is packed with valuable topics to assist you in your role of getting Pennsylvanians covered. First, we're going to cover some housekeeping items. This call is being conducted and recorded through MS Teams Live. In case you'd like to review the content and recording later, or perhaps forward to a colleague who's not present today, you can access the content at agency.pennie.com. You'd click on Workgroup. And while you're on the site, make sure to check out the resources that we have available to you. To limit background noise, all attendee lines are muted. We have Pennie team members monitoring the chat for any general or clarifying questions that you may have. Customer-specific questions can be answered by Pennie's dedicated Assist Your Broker line, and that number is 844-844-4440. And while we're on this topic, I just want to add that our Assist Your Broker dedicated line is truly the first line of defense. We have confidence in our CSRs that they have the tools, resources, and expertise needed to triage and resolve the reason for your call. We understand, however, that it's possible that you feel that you've received potentially inaccurate information or inadequate service. Let's be real, it happens. Everyone makes mistakes, right? We do want you to know, however, that you have the option of escalating the matter at hand to a contact center supervisor. We have a big team of individuals there ready and willing to resolve the reason for your call. You may also email assisters@pennie.com if you're an assister, or brokers@pennie.com if you're a broker. Just be sure to include examples such as the customer's name and application ID, because it could be difficult to answer hypothetical questions. Whether you escalate it to a contact center supervisor or through email, just know that we thoroughly review your concern, which includes in-depth account reviews. At times we listen to phone calls, and it's possible that during this process, we identify and tackle training and coaching opportunities. At the end of the day, we have a common goal. We value your feedback. It helps with continuous improvement, beneficial to all parties involved. And when you think about Pennie's mission to maximize the number of Pennsylvanians with access to affordable and quality health coverage, it makes sense, right? We just finished open enrollment. We received 235,000 phone calls with an average speed of answer of 15 seconds. And just know, we're always ready to improve our processes and help you help our customers better. Next, please. Here you just have a visual of the website and the work group section where you can later find the content. Next, please. Now that we've covered housekeeping items, let's go ahead and get started with today's agenda. We're going to go through some reminders, including customer service hours and training. We'll go over the 2022 1095A forms. We'll provide some operations updates, including the unwinding, some FAQs on DMIs and no APTC application. We'll give you a refresher on SEPs, including Path to Pennie. The external affairs team will provide an update. We'll go over 2024 plan certification policy proposal, and time permitting, we'll answer questions and feedback posted in the chat. Next, please. All right, so we'll dive right into the reminders. And the first reminder we want to give you is Pennie customer service hours. Now that we're outside of open enrollment, The hours are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and we're closed on Saturdays and Sundays. The next holiday observance is President's Day, which is scheduled for Monday, February 20th. The contact center will be closed on this day. Next, please. The second reminder is regarding certification training. As you all may know, we had a recent recertification deadline of December 15th. Assisters or brokers who were decertified for not completing the recertification training can get back in with Pennie by completing the full training on our website or requesting it on our website. We've actually posted the links there for your convenience. Next, please. And now we'll jump right into 1095-A forms for 2022. Customers who received APTC in 2022 must file a federal tax return, including the 8962 form. The tax return reconciles APTC received during the year with the premium tax credit that the customer is eligible to receive based on their actual household income. So Pennie issues a 1095-A forms by the end of January to help a customer fill out their tax return. If a customer received more APTC than the premium tax credit they were eligible to receive, then there will be some excess they'll have to pay back. If a customer received less APTC than the premium tax credits they were eligible to receive, then it's possible for them to receive the remaining credits on their tax return. Just a special note here that anyone can complete the 8962 form, and anyone who was enrolled through Pennie, even if the customer did not apply for or receive APTC, they can still complete the 8962 form to receive a premium tax credit. Next, please. This slide here illustrates an example of what a 1095-A form looks like. Part A will contain the recipient information, including the primary tax filer name, the insurance company, and the coverage start and end dates. Part 2 of the form will have the covered individuals. So here you'll see all enrollees covered under the policy and their respective coverage start and end dates. Next, please. Part 3 of the form will have the coverage information. So for each month of coverage, you'll see the premium, the second lowest cost silver plan, and the APTC received. And the bottom screenshot we included to give you an example of what a 1095-A would look like when non-payment termination occurs. We wanted to include it because it may look like an error initially when you take a look at it because columns A and B are blank, but just know that it's not an error if non-payment termination occurred. The reason is there is a 3-month grace rule before non-payment termination happens. And because the customer didn't pay for the last month's premium, these fields are left blank on the 1095 because the customer can't actually claim a tax credit for months that they didn't pay for. But the APTC is still listed for that month because the carrier did receive it. So if the customer later pays the past due premium, we'll go ahead and get an updated premium paid through date from the insurer, and then the corrected 1095-As will contain all of the values and will be populated on that last month's coverage. Next. Here we have some 1095-A FAQs. So who received a 1095-A from Pennie? Any customer who received coverage through Pennie, as long as they made their binder payment and coverage was effectuated, they will receive a 1095-A. If there are multiple policies, we'll issue a separate 1095 for each policy. How does Pennie deliver 1095-As? We send a copy of the 1095-As to all customers' Pennie Secure inbox. There are customers who elected paper 1095-As, and those will also receive a copy through the mail. Just a quick note that under my preferences for a customer's account, they have the option of selecting paperless or mail for notices and 1095As. What if the customer received too much APTC? How do you know how much they'll have to pay back? Form 8962, the one that we said the customer must complete, will advise if they received more APTC than they were actually eligible for. The form will also indicate how much they have to pay back to the IRS based on their actual income. The lower the income, the lower the amount they have to pay back. If you look at the 1095 and think that there may be potential inaccurate information, you can always contact our Pennie Contact Center and provide your reasoning for why you think it's incorrect, and we'll go ahead and research and issue a corrected 1095A if needed. The last note on here is very important. We encourage customers to review their 2023 income on their application after completing their 22 tax return, just to avoid any excess APTC received in 2023. That's very important. Next, please. Okay, now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Hannah Turner. She's going to go ahead and cover the PHE unwinding update.
Thanks, Marie. Go ahead, next slide. Thank you. So we've been talking about the PHE unwinding for a while now, and just as a reminder, the reason we've been concerned with the PHE unwinding, it has to do with the specific provision that was part of the PHE when it was established in March of 2020. That provision is called the Medicaid Continuous Coverage Requirement, and that said that anyone who was enrolled in Medicaid starting from March of 2020 and still cannot be disenrolled from Medicaid, even if they lose their eligibility for Medicaid. So we've been monitoring, when this provision was going to end, and it's been constantly refreshed every 3 months. But we do now have a final date because in late December 22, Congress passed a law that is going to end this Medicaid continuous coverage requirement April 1st of 2023. It is no longer tied in with the public health emergency. So everything we've been calling the kind of unwinding of the public health emergency is really just this Medicaid continuous coverage requirement. And no matter what, if the public health emergency itself is continued, beyond April of 23, that's not going to change. This Medicaid continuous coverage requirement will end. So what does this mean? And it means that starting April of 23, DHS is going to be redetermining eligibility for all current Medicaid enrollees. Some of these enrollees may have not actually, they may have lost their eligibility for Medicaid for a while, but because this continuous coverage requirement, they've still been enrolled. They may have gotten renewal packets and not filled them out, but they've still been maintained on Medicaid up to now. So starting in April, it's going to be a full redeterminations for everyone on Medicaid, and it's going to continue for a 12-month period. So it's not, everyone's not going to be redetermined all at the exact same time. It'll be spread out. But what we do expect to happen during these redeterminations is that many current Medicaid enrollees are going to lose their Medicaid coverage because they're no longer eligible and they've only continued under Medicaid because of this continuous coverage requirement, and that some significant portion of those who lose their Medicaid coverage will likely be coming to Pennie for coverage. So for several years now, we've been doing a lot of planning and coordination and collaboration with some of our, DHS, with the QHP issuers, our MCOs, et cetera, to kind of plan for what this process will look like. So we're going to be going through that in more detail with you, what this unwinding process will look like in an upcoming community partner work group. So stay tuned for that. We'll do that before the The redeterminations begin in April, but wanted to make sure that if you have not already done so, you can sign up to be a DHS helper. We've got a link down there that they will keep you informed of any updates. They sometimes have webinars and other like newsletters, things they'll send out about, and in particular regarding this continuous coverage requirement and what the redetermination process will look like. And they also have FAQs, some previous webinars available on their site as well. So stay tuned for an upcoming work group. We'll talk through in detail what this is going to look like from an operational perspective and what the customer experience will be, and guide you guys through that. Okay, next slide. Now we want to go over a couple of FAQs that we talk regularly with our contact center, and wanted to address some questions that we've been getting from, in particular from the sister and broker community, and make sure that you have those answers here. So next slide. We'll start off with the question about why is my customer not eligible for APTC? And in particular, when the customer may have been eligible for APTC last year, but they're not eligible for APTC this year. So there's a number of reasons that this can happen, but kind of the top 3 reasons are right here. First is the customer may be potentially eligible for Medicaid or CHIP for 2023. If you look at their dashboard, you'll see the eligibility listed next to each person's name. And so you would see potentially eligible for Medicaid or potentially eligible for CHIP. Now, this can happen even with a customer who has not changed their income from last year. And the reason is because every year we use the updated federal poverty levels to determine eligibility. So for 2022 applications, we use the 2021 FPLs. For 2023 applications, we're now using the 2022 FPLs. So that means that even with the same income, if you had 2022 income that was just above Medicaid or CHIP thresholds, that same income amount may now be just below a Medicaid or CHIP eligibility threshold. So even without changing your income, because of the change in the federal poverty levels that we use, there you could see a difference in eligibility from being APTC eligible to being Medicaid or CHIP eligible. The next thing is that we see as a common reason why someone may not be eligible for APTC this year, and this is particularly on their auto renewal, is that the customer may not have provided us with consent to check their eligibility for APTC at renewal. So whenever someone submits their application, there's a separate election to say, do you want to authorize Pennie to check your eligibility for financial assistance at renewal? They can give up that consent for up to 5 years. And if every year that we use that consent, that number goes down. So it'll be 5 years and 4 and goes down. So you might have someone who just did not provide us consent at all, or it could be someone who provided consent for financial assistance at renewal, but their number of years has been used up. And so one way to check that is when you go in and edit your renewal application. If you go to the signature page, you'll see there, and you can see how many, what the current consent information status is, either no consent or it might say 0 years. And then to fix that, all you do is just submit the application seeking financial assistance, which gives us authority to check their eligibility for financial assistance and check the data hub, and then they'll get their determination whether they're eligible for APTC or not. And then lastly, there's a few different parts of the application that we see are common areas where that will cause someone to no longer be eligible for financial assistance. One is check their tax filing status. So if someone says they're not planning on filing a tax return or is married filing separately, those will make someone ineligible for APTC. The next place to look is at the reconciliation of APTC question. This is the question where we ask someone, if you've received APTC in a prior year, did you reconcile that with the federal government? And that just means, filing your taxes and claiming the APTC on your tax return. If you did not reconcile APTC that you had received in a prior year, then you are not eligible for APTC going forward. And then the other part of the application that we've seen some folks struggling with is the new ESI affordability questions, the employer-sponsored insurance questions. Those questions were updated on the 2023 application because of the new rule that fixed the family glitch. And so there's a lot more detailed information that we now have to ask in particular about the cost of self-only coverage, the cost of family coverage. So that's another area that we've seen that's worth reviewing. We did talk a lot about that in the December 22 work group, including different scenarios and how you fill out that application, that part of the application. So you can go check out the December work group for a very detailed walkthrough on those ESI affordability questions. So these are just the most common reasons. There can be other reasons because eligibility is really complex. So if you have any questions, you're not able to figure it out, and you don't understand why someone was ineligible for APTC, give us a call, and customer service can walk you through it and try to figure out what the reason was that they are no longer eligible for APTC. Okay, next slide. The other area that we've been getting a lot of questions in, and I've seen some questions also coming through in the chat, are about DMIs, the data matching issues, and how to resolve those. So we, want to refer you back to we've covered this topic a bit, both in November. We talked a lot about the income DMI in particular, how to use the attestation form, common reasons why documents may not be accepted, and how to handle certain scenarios where someone maybe doesn't have sufficient documentation for all of their reported income, or their income, the documentation shows what their income was in a prior year, but they expect it to be different this year and they can't document that. So please go back and check out the November work group for how to handle some of those income DMI situations. And then if you have other types of DMIs, we did discuss those back in May 22 work group, also available on the community work group site for all the different types of DMIs, what types of adverse action happens if they don't resolve it, how to tell when someone has an open DMI, how to upload documents, and how to verify that those documents you uploaded actually did successfully resolve the DMI, or it might not have been successful, sufficient documentation, and so there's still further action required. Great. So next slide, we're going to move into special enrollment period refresher. So open enrollment has just ended, and so now we need to kind of put our minds back into SEP mode. Next slide. So of course, SEP can happen throughout the year, but now that open enrollment's closed, that's the only way for someone to enroll in coverage through Pennie, and it's triggered by a range of qualifying life events. Next slide. And so they kind of fall into 4 buckets. There's the types of scenarios where you lose health coverage, the change in household scenarios, that's like marriage, birth, etc. Change in residence, so moving either into the state, moving to different parts of the state where the plans are different, and then a whole host of other qualifying life events. We do have an SEP quick reference chart that lists all of those events, including who's eligible for it, the rules, whether you need to provide documentation before you can shop, and etc. So please check that out on our resources page. But go ahead and go to the next slide. I want to talk a bit about the loss of MEC SEP, because that is by far one of the most common SEPs that we see people using to enroll in Pennie, coverage through Pennie outside of open enrollment. And it's widely available, so it's available to people who are currently enrolled, as well as people who are not currently enrolled through Pennie. But one of the unique things about the loss of MEC SEP is that it is available, one of the few SEPs that you can report in advance of the event happening. So you can report it up to 60 days before you actually lose the coverage, or up to 60 days after you lose the coverage. Loss of MEC SEP, and then some of the moving SEPs are basically the only ones that allow you to report them in advance of the event. So the coverage start date is generally the first of the month after shopping. If you're shopping in advance of your event, then the earliest you can have your coverage start is the first day of the month following the event date being the loss of coverage date. And it is a self-attested document SEP, so there's no documentation required prior to enrolling. Next slide. So we get a lot of questions about what scenarios qualify for loss of MEC and what scenarios do not qualify for the loss of MEC. So on the left, you'll see here sort of the common eligible scenarios, and they are, an involuntary loss of your employer coverage through an employer, loss of Medicaid or CHIP, and exhaustion of COBRA. So that's someone who actually enrolled in COBRA and then maximized the maximum duration of COBRA and now can no longer continue that COBRA. Ineligible scenarios. So these are scenarios where someone did lose their coverage, but they are not eligible for a loss of MEC SEP. The first one is if your coverage was terminated due to non-payment of premiums, that does not qualify someone for a loss of MEC SEP. They would need some other life event to be able to enroll prior to the upcoming open enrollment period. Another scenario where someone would lose their coverage but not be eligible for the loss of MEC SEP would be if someone loses their coverage because their DMI expired. So the DMIs that are other than income, so citizenship, lawful presence, Social Security, et cetera, those types of DMIs, if those are not resolved, that results in termination of their coverage. Those folks don't qualify for a loss of MEC SEP. They would need some other life event in order to be able to enroll prior to open enrollment. And then the COBRA scenario is if someone enrolls in COBRA but then terminates their COBRA prior to having exhausted the maximum amount of COBRA that they're eligible for. That is also not eligible for a loss of MEC SEP. Okay. So, we said that this event, it does not require that you provide documentation before you shop for a plan. It is self-attested to initially. That does not mean that Pennie can't still come and ask for documentation to verify their eligibility for this SEP after the fact. We are still able to do that. And if we do request that information, and we find out that someone enrolled with that of SEP, but they were not eligible for the SEP, there can be adverse action taken, and it depends on the facts and circumstances, but it could be anything from termination of their coverage to potentially a retroactive cancellation of their coverage, and other things. Just depends on the facts around that case. Obviously everything that folks do on our application is they're testing to the truthfulness of it under penalty of perjury. So, there can be serious consequences to intentionally lying on our application. And not that we would ever expect anyone like an assistant or broker to encourage someone to provide incorrect information, but there could be consequences if that occurred as well. So we don't want to be in the situation where someone enrolled and then later finds out that they were not eligible, and then it can get terminated or potentially retroactive. So please make sure that you're helping your customers figure out whether they're in an actual eligible loss of MEC scenario or not. Next slide. So for resources for SEPs, I talked about the quick reference guide as earlier. That's a screenshot of that on the right. And then we did also have some specific work groups where we talked and went more in depth on SEPs. So we talked a lot about loss of MEC in August of 22. So you can go check out that work group, as well as if you need a refresher on what the process looks like when you're reporting a life event that requires you to provide documents before shopping. We went through that in depth in February, so you can walk through that. Even I think we have a video recording of that, so you can see what those screens look like and how you know when you need to provide documents, and how you know when that SEP has been approved and now you can shop for a plan. And then, of course, if you have any questions about SEPs now, give us a call. Our customer service team is well versed in these and can help you figure out whether someone's eligible or not, and what the different SEPs mean. Now let's go on to the next slide. Let's talk about a very specific SEP, which is the Path to Pennie SEP. It's really called the tax filer SEP. Next slide. And so the Path to Pennie is a new program we started last year. It's a partnership with the Department of Revenue, and it's a way for us to connect uninsured Pennsylvanians with access to health coverage through Pennie by having them fill out this form Rev 1882 when they file their state tax return. Then the Department of Revenue sends their information to us, and we get them going down the path to enrolling in coverage. One key update here is that we did make a lot of progress this year in working with all of the major tax preparer software platforms to make sure that they were able to support submissions of the Rev 1882 form. And so we are at the point where almost all of the major tax preparers are able to support filing this Rev 1882 form. So next slide. So this is a good kind of visual representation of what happens with the path to Pennie. So start with step one, where the customer fills out that Rev 1882 form with their state tax return. When they do that, they obviously submit to the Department of Revenue. In step two, the Department of Revenue then takes that information and securely transmits that to Pennie. And then Pennie, we reach out to the individual and connect them with how to get their coverage through Pennie. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about what this looks like in each specific, customer scenario that you might see happen. So this first scenario is basically the happy path scenario. This is where the customer submits that Rev 1882 form, and we receive that information from the Department of Revenue. We then send the customer a notice through the U.S. mail, and they also get an email alert if they provide an email address. And that says, hey, we've gotten your information, but because of from the Department of Revenue, because of the form you submitted, here's a claim code. Go ahead and use that claim code to set up your account through Pennie, and then you'll automatically be approved for this tax filer SEP. The key things for this scenario are they do need to use that access code or use this SSN to claim that account that we set up as part of this Rev 1882 form process. That is what triggers them automatically being granted that tax filer SEP. When folks go through this process, their SEP is 60 days starting from the date of the notice that we send to them through the US mail and the email alert. Okay. So the next possible scenario a customer might see is, let's say they submitted that form. We got their information from the Department of Revenue, but there was something missing, some missing information. And so we weren't able to fully process it like we do with the customers in that first scenario. So they'll have a slightly different process here. So they will get a notice from us, but it's only going to be an email alert saying, hey, we got your information. We were missing some of it. So here's what you need to do. They need to go in and either create a new account, or if they have an existing account, they could log into that. They won't get an access code or anything. They'll do their application, and then to get the life event, they'll need to actually call Pennie. And then our representatives can actually walk them through the process and approve it on the phone and open up the SEP for them right then and there. Then they'll have the SEP available for up to 60 days from that date of that call, because we'll be able to open the SEP right then on the phone. And now next slide, next one. Scenario 3 is similar to scenario 2, except this is people who've submitted that form, but they don't get a notice from us. And typically we see this because they've just submitted the form to the Department of Revenue, and we haven't received the information from the Department of Revenue yet. Department of Revenue may not have finished processing their tax return or whatever might have happened, but they can still get their SEP. They're going to follow a path pretty similar to the previous scenario 2. They're going to go in to either create their new account or use an existing account, call us. We'll be able to approve that SEP on the phone. They'll be able to immediately shop for a plan. They'll have up to 60 days from the date they called us. Okay. And then last scenario is the scenario where, let's say someone was not able to submit the form because their tax preparer software does not make that form available to them. Like I said, this is a very small number of tax preparers, and there are much smaller tax preparer software platforms that don't support it, but there are still some. So if someone is in that situation where they could not possibly submit the form, then they are still able to access this SEP, but the process is a little bit different. So they'll come to us and create their new account or log into an existing account, call us, but they're going to have to give us their information, say that they didn't file the form because it wasn't available, and then we will submit their information to the Department of Revenue to verify that, one, the customer actually submitted their tax return, and two, that they submitted it with one of those, that small number of vendors who do not support and make the Rev 1882 form available. The SEP in this scenario is only granted once we get that verification back from DOR. And once it's granted, then the 60 days starts from that point forward. I'll let you know that we see sometimes that DOR verification is very quick, and sometimes it can take a lot of time. We've seen it take time because the person actually had not filed their tax return yet, or they just filed it, but DOR hadn't processed it yet, or their information on their tax form didn't match the information they provided us, so DOR couldn't match it up. So it can vary there, and it just depends on the facts of that case. But that's the only scenario where someone would need to wait to be able to be potentially eligible for the SEP. We have a lot more information on this from our April work group last year, if you want to kind of walk through step by step and what it looks through on this, like on the screenshots. But these are the 4 types of situations you might see a customer experience and how they would access the Path to Pennie SEP. Next slide. Did want to also make sure that you had access to copies of the notices and alerts they would receive. So on the left, you'll see the US mail notice and the email alert for those customers in that scenario 1. That's that Happy Path scenario where they're going to get the access code. On the right, you'll see the email alert that we send for scenario 2, where the customer submitted their form, but it was missing information, so we couldn't complete processing. And that's the one that tells them how to proceed to get the SEP. Next slide. So just a few FAQs here. Obviously, the coverage start date when you're using a Path to Pennie SEP is the coverage starts the first day of the month following planned shopping. And we often get asked if this Path to Pennie SEP is available after the April tax filing deadline. And the answer is yes. It technically could be receive the Path to Pennie SEP at any time throughout the year, but it's all based on when the customer submits that form to the Department of Revenue. So the vast majority of the folks using this SEP are going to be between now and April filing deadline. But if someone has an extension and they file an amended return after April, we do still have a regular process where we would receive updates from Department of Revenue and could open up that SEP in August or whatever that happens outside of April. So it is available after April, even though we see the vast majority of folks using it between the end of January and the April deadline. And then last one, of course, as we talked about, the SEP is available to folks when the Rev 1882 form was not available through their tax preparer software. Just given this year that we have the vast majority of tax preparer software does allow individuals to submit that Rev 1882. If you have someone who has already submitted their tax return but did not submit the Rev 1882 that was available to them because they just didn't realize about it, they are not going to be able to get the SEP unless they submit the Rev 1882 form. So they would have to go talk to their tax advisor about submitting an amended return. The only people who can get the SEP without submitting the Rev 1882 form are folks where that form was just simply not available through their software platform. Okay, and now I think I'm going to hand it over to Kelsey to do her an external affairs update.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kelsey Cameron. I'm the Marketing Communications Manager here at Pennie. Just going to give a quick update today. 1095A forms that we talked about earlier, just the communications that went out. Earlier this week, we sent an email over to you guys, the stakeholders, just for awareness that the 1095A forms were coming out and that the customers will be notified shortly. And then we also did send an email to all customers receiving the form, just a shout out that they should be aware the forms are coming their way. And then Path to Pennie, communications and marketing. We will be sending an email to all stakeholders next week with a link to our Path to Pennie toolkit. That toolkit includes talking points, a collateral page 1-pager that can be shared, and social media graphics as well as social media posts. When it comes to the customer communications, like Hannah mentioned earlier, we have the notice and the emails. and the calling scripts ready to go to the impacted customers who fill out the form. And then we also next week on the Wednesday next week, January 25th, we will be doing a Path to Penny webinar with tax professionals. So that's just a 1-hour webinar, just a Q&A, really helping them figure out the Path to Penny form. Like Hannah mentioned, this form is now available for more tax softwares this year. We also are doing an advertising campaign and a social media campaign for the Path to Penny advertising that's going to be pretty heavily digital and like with commercials and radios on streaming platforms. And then also Pennie will be doing their own social media campaign. So check out our social pages and share as you can. And then our customer communications, we also will be sending an email next week to all current customers with a satisfaction survey. We'll be doing another edition of the Pennie newsletter here shortly, and then our regular special enrollment period advertising and social campaign. So that's pretty much what we have going on in external affairs, but I think I'm going to share it back to Hannah now.
Great, thanks, Kelsey. So we wanted to pivot now to talk about the 2024 plan certification policy proposal, where we are seeking feedback. So go ahead and go to the next slide for me. Okay, so some of you will have seen this. We sent an email alert out, I think, on Friday of last week. And we are, every year, we go through this process of developing our Pennie-specific policies that are applied to all the health plans offered through Pennie. These are policies that apply in addition to federal and state regulations that apply to all QHPs. So every year around this time of year, we just finished open enrollment for 2023, and we're already thinking about 2024. So we will usually develop our policy proposal and then submit it out for stakeholder feedback. And then once we receive our feedback from stakeholders, we'll prepare our recommendations for the board, and then we'll take it to the board meeting to develop an approved policy for the upcoming plan year. Next slide. So this year we actually have a lot of things in our proposed policy. We do not have time to go through all of these, but this is a quick summary. We're only going to talk about focus on the renewal plan mapping proposals in today's session, just because of time. But we do want to make sure that you know how to access the full policy. If you go proposal and the feedback form, going to agency.pennie.com/policies, you'll find the whole policy proposal as well as the link to the feedback form. Feedback is due by February 15th, 2023, and our plan is to present our proposal and the stakeholder feedback to the board at our February 24th board meeting. So check that out. But for now, we're going to focus just on the renewal plan mapping section here. So go ahead and go to the next slide for me. Okay. So renewal plan mapping is the policies that say if a customer is currently enrolled in a plan at the end of the year, what plan do we auto renew them into? And up until now, we've been using the previous federal standard, which has, we'll go over what that looks like in a bit. And basically it says if customer is eligible, if their same plan is available in the upcoming year, then we're going to auto renew them into the same plan. But what it does in particular is really important to say, if their same plan is not available for the upcoming year, then it helps us to identify what the most comparable plan is that they should be auto renewed into by looking at the benefits, the plan type, and provider network. It doesn't take into account premiums. It's really just about finding the closest plan with the most comparable benefits to their current plan. Obviously, this is for generating auto renewal enrollments. If someone does not like their auto renewed plan, they can always change their plan by shopping during open enrollment. But the real goal is to make sure that people have a really seamless auto renewal to allow for them to have continuous coverage in the upcoming year with something that matches as best as possible to their current plan. So before we talk about how renewal plan mapping works right now, we want to go over some terms just because it can be a little bit confusing, and so I want to make sure that we all have a good baseline here. So next slide. So if we think about all of our health plan offerings as sort of products on a shelf, and that within a particular issuer, we have like a set of products, literally products, which are a set of benefits that are offered through a particular provider network type. You could sort of simply say HMO products are an insurer's, that's one product suite from an issuer. Their PPO products are a different suite. Their EPO products are a different product suite. And then within that product suite, there's a bunch of different plans. And those plans have, while they have the same network type and the same benefits covered, they have different cost sharing. So in this example, like the Silver HMO 1 is a particular plan within that HMO product. And then every plan within a product has the metal level. That's sort of the shelf itself, which says that all of the plans on that shelf pay on average the same amount. Pay in this case for a silver plan, the plan pays on average for the average person approximately 70% of the cost for health coverage, and the customer would pay approximately 30%. And then each of the plans within that, Silver HMO 1, HMO 2, HMO 3 on this graphic here, have a different cost sharing design, but that still meet that metal level. Okay, so product is simply, at the simple version, it's really just like, you can think of it as the plan type, and the plan is the actual specific product that item that they're purchasing. Okay. So why that's important, let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about how the current renewal plan mapping rules work, because this all sort of happens behind the scenes, but it's important to understand these so we can talk about why we want to make some proposed changes. So for those who like to read regulations, you have your information on the left, but I think for most people that's too much, so we're going to focus on the right, sort of walking through how the current rules work. So this is sort of the decision tree here. We start off by saying, is the same plan available that they're currently enrolled in? And if it is, great, then we have figured out that's their renewed plan and we're done. But that's the simple path. What do we do when that same plan is not available? So when the same plan is not available, the next question we ask is are there plans in the same product from the same issuer? And if there are, then we say, okay, great, we're going to keep them in the same product, the same issuer. Now let's find a plan within that product suite that is the closest metal level to where they are. And then that's how we figure out their renewal plan. If there are no other plans from that same product, so in our previous example, we were looking at those HMO products, if the carrier no longer offers HMO products in their area, then we would look to see, are there products from the same carrier, but with a different product line? So maybe there's no HMO products, but there might be a PPO product available with that same issuer. And if there are, then again, we look for the closest metal level to what metal level they were currently enrolled in, and that's how we figure out which plan they should be auto-renewed into. And then, of course, the last scenario is if the carrier is not offering any plans in that market, essentially they've pulled out of that service area, then you go into a whole other situation where you could potentially map to other carriers. We're not going to go into that. Really, what we are focused on with the renewal mapping is what plan do we offer from within the same issuer's available plans when their current plan is not available. Okay. So next slide will sort of show us sort of a simplistic way of doing this. So essentially, what those rules say is, here's our priority order. Our first priority is we want to get them someone in the same plan. If that's not available, then our next priority is we want to get the person into the same product, HMO, PPO, EPO, et cetera. And then if that same product isn't even available, then we just want to get them in the closest metal level to where they are currently, even if it's a different product. So we've got a few examples to walk through so you understand kind of how these rules would apply. So let's say we have somebody who's enrolled in a Gold EPO 1 plan, and that plan is not available for the upcoming year. So now we have to use these rules to figure out which plan we would auto-renew them into. So in our first example, we ask ourselves our first question and say, okay, are there other EPOs available? So let's look, are there other products, plans with the same product? And in this case, the carrier does have other EPOs plans available across all the different metal levels. Great, so then we want to find the closest metal level to where they are, the current plan. So in that scenario, we would be mapping someone from like the Gold EPO 1 plan to a Gold EPO 2 plan. So it's another same metal level and same product, but it is a different plan. So let's go to another example here. In this example, this is where the carrier is just not offering any other EPOs. So we're in that gold EPO 1 plan, but there's no other EPOs offered in the upcoming year. So we can't map to the same products from the issuer. So then we look to see, okay, are there different products that are available, but at the same metal level? And in my example 2, yes, there might not be any EPO products, but there are PPO products at the gold level. So in that case, we couldn't map to the same product, but we're going to map to the same metal level. So we would map in that scenario from a gold EPO 1 to gold PPO 1 plan. So it's a different product, but we're at least getting the same metal level. And then one more example here. So let's say we have, there are other EPOs available, but the only metal level is at the bronze metal level. So remember, we're starting in a gold EPO 1 plan, and the first priority is to put them in the same product. So there are other EPOs, but that EPO is at the bronze level. It's the only thing that's available. The current rules would actually end up mapping this person from a gold EPO to a bronze EPO plan based on the current rules in this priority order. And that actually is, the scenario doesn't happen that often, but that's a scenario that we want to try to modify the rules to prevent, because that's a pretty significant difference in metal level, and that may not be the best mapping for people in that situation. So go ahead and go to the next slide for me. So what we're proposing to do is modify our existing renewal plan mapping rules to say, if you're in a situation where you're going to map across more than 2 or more metal levels, so like our gold to bronze, or it could be the reverse, bronze to gold, before you do that, we would look to see, is there a different product at the same metal level that is a more comparable plan that we should renew them into? So in our example 3, we had this where we focused on priority of the product. So that's where we end up mapping a gold EPO plan to a bronze EPO plan. If we had this rule, then we would say, are there other products at the same metal level that would be a better fit? And in this case, we could map them from the gold EPO to a gold PPO plan, which, while it is a different product, it would be the same metal level. And as long as that PPO has very similar benefits and a provider network to the gold EPO, then we're saying that this rule would say that that's a better mapping than keeping the person in an EPO product, but changing their metal level by 2 metal levels. That would be more disruptive to be in gold to bronze than to be in gold EPO to gold PPO. So like I said, this scenario doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it could be pretty disruptive to folks, and we think there's a better way to map them. And so that's what our proposal is here, is to say, when we're in that situation where you're going to map more than 2 metal levels difference from their current plan, then you should evaluate if there are different products at the same metal level that would be a better fit. So what we're looking for in feedback here is, are there other considerations that we should make when saying, a different product is a better fit than the same product at 2 metal levels or more apart? Our current proposal looks at having similar benefits and a similar provider network to the current product. But if there's other things that we should consider, we definitely want to hear your feedback on that, because the goal is to define the rule in a way that gets people to the best fit for the most comparable plan with the least amount of disruption to them. Okay, so that's our first proposed modification to our renewal plan mapping here. There's another proposal that we have that would modify our renewal plan mapping rules. So go ahead and go to the next slide for me. And then this is about actually ties back to a proposal that the federal government's making in their 2024 proposed rule, NBPP rule, and saying that on healthcare.gov, they are considering a new mapping rule that would map people who are currently in a bronze plan, who are eligible for a cost sharing reduction, that we would, instead of mapping them to another bronze plan, you would actually map them into a silver plan because they are eligible for cost sharing reductions. And that's a better value for them to be in a silver plan with cost sharing reductions than to be in a bronze plan without cost sharing reductions. So the way that would work is, see on the bottom left, you'd say, is the person's currently enrolled in a bronze plan and they're CSR eligible. Then we would auto renew them into a silver plan only if their net premium, so their cost after APTC to enroll in the silver plan, is no more expensive than their cost to enroll in that bronze plan for the upcoming year. So this would apply even if their current bronze plan is available. We would, instead of mapping them to the exact same plan, we could potentially end up mapping them to a silver plan so they can leverage those cost share reduction benefits. And then if you look at the graphic on the right, that kind of shows how the priority is changed. So now we've got logic to say at our highest priority, some people we're going to look to prioritize potentially their eligibility for cost sharing reductions and their net cost over enrolling them in the exact same plan, because the bronze, there's a better value for them to be enrolled in the cost sharing reduction silver plan. So this is a proposed rule. It's not final yet, and CMS is only proposing this for healthcare.gov. States are not required to implement this, but this is definitely a population that we've been very concerned about, right? There's CSR benefits can be really rich, and it's a little bit confusing. Not everybody understands it, and the concern is that people that are enrolled in bronze are really missing out on a big benefit that they are eligible for. So let's go to the next slide and just a quick scenario. We'll see what this looks like. So our first example here, we have got somebody who's enrolled in HealthCo's bronze EPO plan. Under the current rules, they would be auto-renewed into that same plan with a net premium of $50. Under the new proposed rule, they are CSR eligible, and the CSR plan, silver CSR plan they would be enrolled in, is a net premium of $20. So that person, example one, would benefit from this new rule, and we would put them into the silver CSR plan instead of the bronze plan. Example two, same setup. They're in the same bronze plan. They are CSR eligible, but their net premium is a little bit different, right? That can be based on their age and their APTC eligibility. In that case, the bronze plan is $75 net premium and the silver plan is $80 net premium. So because that silver plan is just $5 more in net premium than the bronze plan, that person would stay in the bronze plan for the upcoming year. So we've been looking at this rule and thinking about it, and go ahead and go to the next slide for me, and realizing when you do the underlying math and the way that premium rating rules work and the way APTC calculations work, it's really very few people would benefit from this because it's not often they're going to have a silver CSR plan that's going to be same or less net premium than their bronze plan. So we like the idea, and it's a really important population to try to help get them into and maximizing their benefits. But we're actually proposing a slightly different alternative to what healthcare.gov is proposing. So our proposal that we are considering is to implement the same idea. So if somebody's currently enrolled in bronze and is CSR eligible, then we would map them, their auto renewal, into a silver CSR plan. But in our version, we would say we would do that as long as the net premium for that silver plan is no more than $10 more per month than the bronze plan. So instead of healthcare.gov's proposal says $0 more to enroll in the silver versus the bronze plan, we're proposing an up to $10 more to enroll in the silver plan than the bronze plan. And because this would allow a lot more people to benefit from this, but also that the idea that cost sharing reduction is such a huge value to customers that it's worth the up to $10 more net premium over the bronze. Some of those CSR plans are plans that you're buying for silver level premiums, but you're getting better than platinum benefits. And so there are scenarios where that is worth potentially up to $10 more. And so that's our proposal. It's a slight tweak here. And the way that would work is in our previous example, number 2, where the silver plan was only $5 more under the healthcare.gov proposed rules that they're considering, they would keep the person in the bronze plan. Under our alternative, because it's only $5 more, we would actually put the person into the silver CSR plan. So what we are looking for here is to get feedback on this proposal with our alternative proposal with the $10, potentially up to $10 more per month, and get, you see all our questions here at the bottom. We want to know, do you think that people are going to, there's going to be a customer abrasion simply from moving from a bronze plan to a silver plan as an auto renewal, putting aside the actual net premiums difference? Is that in of itself going to cause any disruption to customers? And then, do you think that the healthcare.gov proposal, where it's $0 net premium increase, is a better approach than our alternative that we're proposing, and why? And then, are there other amounts of a net premium increase? Maybe $10 per month is not the right amount. Maybe you think $5 increase is a better amount, or maybe it's 10% more, or if you think is there a better metric to create that threshold around the net premium that we could be using instead of $10 a month. And then also, lastly, are there other ways that you think that we could be better helping these customers who are enrolled in bronze plans and who are eligible for CSR? Like, are there better ways that we could be reaching out to these folks? This is the population we've been doing targeted outreach to for the last 2 open enrollments, really focused on making sure they understand what that cost sharing reduction benefits are, and that, they might be eligible for a plan at the same cost with a lot more benefits. And so we're also just looking for other ways to try to reach this population to make sure that they are getting the maximum value of these benefits that they're eligible for, and in a way that helps them maximize their benefits there. Okay, so these are just the renewal plan mapping sections. We wanted to go through those. I think it's a really complicated, nuanced situations, and we want to make sure that we get your feedback. But there are other proposals in our full plan certification policy proposal for 2024. Please go to that link we had earlier where you can read the full proposal, and we definitely want to hear feedback on renewal mapping or on any of those proposals. We do take that seriously and use that to help inform what we present to the board, and board hears your feedback as well and use that in the decision-making process. And that, again, reminder that feedback is due by February 15th. And then now next slide, I'm just going to hand it back over to Marie for our wrap up.
Hannah. So that concludes today's session. Any unanswered questions in the chat will be included and posted in the Q&A on our website, which is, again, agency.pennie.com under Workgroup. Remember that we'll also post the deck and the recording on there. Feel free to make recommendations of topics for these sessions at agency.pennie.com/contact. We prepare these sessions for you and would love to hear feedback on topics you'd like to be covered. Thank you, Hannah and Kelsey, for your presentation today. Thank you all for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll talk to you next month. Take care now. Bye-bye.